So good morning, everyone. Once again, remember we record our sessions, we post on our YouTube page. Today, we are back to the book, On the Way to the Light. In the Greater World. In the Greater World. Let me share here the screen here. So last month, we study Andre Luiz and Calderaro visit to the lower zones, to the lower zones. They were going to the caverns, and Sister Cipriana thought it was not a good idea for Andre Luiz, that he was not prepared to deal with the reality of the deep lower zones. So he prevented Andre Luiz to go deeper into the caverns. He stayed outside with Calderaro, and they met some suffering spirits, some mocking spirits going to different struggles as a consequence of their behavior in the physical life and their mental vibrations. So we went through different cases. We talked about the similarities with the previous chapter, which was the asylum, the hospice they visited, and now this chapter they continue in that area, in the lower zones, and we'll find the reason that Andre Luiz ended up there in this chapter. We are very close to the end of the book. We have 3 chapters left, and this one it's going to deal with an old affection. I'm going to ask Zoraida, you're going to read for us, or Philip?
Yes.
Paco's connection is not very good, so I'll ask Zoraida to read.
Okay, no problem. Okay, chapter 18, An Old Affection. We hadn't gone far when an odd group of little old men stopped beside us. Their distorted faces had dreadful features, and they were ragged and skeletal. They were carrying handfuls of a mud-like substance, and at the slightest breeze, they would clutch it anxiously against their hearts, as if they were terrified of losing it. They were looking at each other terrified, as if they feared an impending disaster, and they were whispering among themselves in a spiteful and suspicious manner. At times they seemed ready to flee, but out of fear and suspicion, they stayed put. One of them remarked in a raspy voice, "We've got to find a way out. We can't hang around here. What about our businesses, our homes? The wealth we discovered is incalculable." And he would boastfully hold up the handfuls of mud oozing through his warped fingers. But he continued thoughtfully, "All this gold is at the mercy of thieves in this miserable marshland. We absolutely have to find a way back. This place will scare anyone." Listening to this odd character, I looked at Calderaro questioningly, who explained, "These are misers who discarded many years ago. They lowered themselves to such a profound degree of attachment to transitory material wealth that they became incapable of reaching the equilibrium of the mental zone of dignified work, and were unable to assess the inner sanctuary of the higher aspirations. While on the earth, they couldn't see how they could support themselves by being moderately ambitious, nor did they give any thought to the methods they used to reach their selfish ends. They scorned other people's rights and mocked their afflictions. They took advantage of the naivety and blind trust of imprudent acquaintances and laid variable traps for them in order to drain their savings and enrich themselves. As a consequence of having spread so much suffering through their thoughtless actions, the mental matter of their victims sends out malevolent emissions of vengeance and cursing, imposing ethereal armor around their field of thought. They are completely numbed with their minds fixated on their wrongs of the past, and they have become true ghosts of greed, tormented by mirages of gold in this wasteland of suffering. We can't tell when they will finally wake up, given their situation. I felt truly sorry for them, to which Calderaro stated, they went mad in the fever of possessing and ending their sinister enterprise, enslaved by mental monsters of indefinable shame.
Okay.
Mm.
So it's a little, some comments here, because we are seeing this. First, we have to understand where they are. They are really in the lower zones, meaning the spirits that are there are spirits that are, so to say, many of them are out of their minds. Many of them take pleasure in dominating others, in ruling by force inferior spirits. So this group of old men, first, how can they be old men in the spiritual world, right? Well, that's how they see themselves, because they are not, as they say here, they don't really understand completely that they are in the spiritual world. They are in a confusion state of mind. And we see here that by the description that Andre Luiz gave us, this is not simply spirits that were attached to material things without thinking of anything else, but not in a harmful way. Not, because there are those that are attached to material things that are very, selfish, but do not actively try to take advantage of others and steal from others. In this case, this old man, as it was described here, they, during their physical lives, they actively took advantage of others. They really stole from others in any possible way they could getting away with it. So they created many enemies, and they created consequences for their actions. So what we are seeing here is that they are in a disturbed state of mind, or you can say crazy if you want, because the word here is really what they are, because they think they are carrying mud, thinking that mud-like substance, that they think it's gold. Why do they think it's gold? Because that's all they thought during their physical life, accumulating riches at the expense of anyone else around them. So they find themselves back in the spiritual world, but their mental vibration, their thought process only thinks about accumulating riches. They spend whatever many years in their lives, 60, 70, 80 years, only thinking of accumulating riches and taking advantage of all possibilities. So that's where they find themselves in the spiritual world, because dying, going back to the spiritual world, doesn't change who we are. We just lose the physical body. The thoughts are the same. Now, maybe the trauma of losing the physical life and going back to the spiritual world can awaken us to a different reality, but it not necessarily. Some of them, and we see it here, they haven't changed anything. They continue to look after riches. They think that this mud-like substance that I don't know where they found it or they created with their own minds, it's gold, and they are trying to protect this gold from thieves. So what happens when you deceive everybody? You live a life of deceiving others. Your thoughts are everybody else is trying to deceive you also. So you live in a constant state of trying to take advantage of others and trying to protect yourself from others because you think that others are trying to take advantage of you. It's very common, right? We think that others think like ourselves in all aspects. So those that are always conspiring against something think that all others are conspiring also against them. So the consequence is that, in this case, they find themselves with the possession of this mud, thinking that it's gold and thinking that everyone else wants to steal this from them. So it's very important here to understand who are these people. They scorn other people's rights and mock their afflictions. They took advantage of the naivety and blind trust of imprudent acquaintances and laid veritable traps for them in order to drain their savings and enrich themselves. This is very important, right? Because we may have the impression, oh, if you only think of material things, you don't think about the spiritual things. That doesn't make you go to this place. What makes you go to the place like this is an active pursuit of riches to the taking advantage of others. So that's very important here. So they are tormented by mirages of gold because they live in their own, as Andre Luiz says here, the true ghosts of greed. Their minds are fixated on the wrongs of the past because in the end we know that our conscience, the natural law, is in our conscience. So they know that they didn't do right, but they are still not prepared to admit to themselves that they were taking advantage of others, because what they think here and why they find themselves in this situation is, yes, I took advantage of others, but others were trying to take advantage of me also. So I'm just defending myself. So they don't admit that they were doing something wrong. They are just telling themselves they know that what they did was not proper, but everyone else was doing. So they see no fault in themselves, and until they find some sort of repentance, some glimpse of understanding of their situation, the assistance that is available to them, they won't be able to receive it. And we'll see how this assistance works later in the chapter, because that's why we are studying this chapter. But this first part, it's important for us to understand who are these people and these spirits and why they find themselves in this situation. Okay? Any comments, questions?
Yeah, João. One in the book, or the audio book, Instruções Psicofônicas, there is this case of this person, of course not discarnated, who spent his whole physical life just trying to gain more and more possession. He was obsessed with gold, he was obsessed with fortune. And upon discarnation, I don't know if you remember, all that he touched, all that he became real, the King Midas folklore, that in reality, in the spiritual world, everything that he touched, everything that he wanted to do would transform into gold. So for those individuals that now having mud in their hands and think it's gold, it's very appropriate because they have that obsessive with richness, with gold, that they will hold on to mud and think that it's gold, because in their mind, those things has been transformed into gold.
Yeah.
Another thing is, in accordance to the divine laws, I'll place the question that, let's assume those individuals have done what they did to others. And let's assume that 100% of the others, the ones that's been victimized by them, have completely forgiven those individuals. How would the natural law act in that situation?
That's a question.
That's a question
Yeah.
for everyone to answer.
Yeah. They.
Because I'm guessing, because it's I don't know if I'm wrong, but when I read it, it implies to me that they are suffering the consequence of the act because of the pondering of the negative energies that the others, not able to forgive them, are injecting into them.
No, I think that that's also a consequence of what they are seeing. But even if no one was persecuting them or blaming them, their own minds are so consumed by the thoughts of enriching and taking advantage of others that even if they were not being affected by the negative vibrations of those that they persecuted, they would still find themselves in this situation, because also their minds are connected to each other. So they formed a group of like-minded spirits with the same desires and ambitions, right? So one feeds the other there in the group.
Yeah, so that's the point that I want to make, exactly what you said, that the divine laws is not dependent on the way the other thinks. The divine laws will act independently. The inability of the others in the case to not forgive and move on is now affecting them more than the perpetrators in the lower zone itself. They have to deal with the consequence of the acts regardless of what the victims are thinking. Naturally, the bombardment of negative energies are not helpful, but it's even more damaging to the victims who are not able to forgive themselves.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because it's very important also, because sometimes we think that we blame the obsessors, we blame the spirit, the persecutors, and actually the biggest blame is on ourselves, right? We create the conditions for ourselves, and we associate ourselves with like-minded spirits. So again, of course, the Elmo's case is theoretical, because you can never have 100%
Oh, yeah, of course.
forgiveness from others, because we are still at a stage that forgiveness, it's some forgive, some cannot. But just sorry, Paco, Anna has a question before. Go ahead, Anna.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I wonder if there is a difference, or perhaps even a different place in the lower zones for the ones that actually feel guilty and can't forgive themselves. But this case, it seems a bit different. It seems like they're not there yet. It's not like they even feel guilty at all. They're just there because they attracted each other, because they have the same vibration. They're in that place. I imagine that the ones that are feeling guilty perhaps are a bit different from these ones. Am I right? It's just
Yes.
as bad, I imagine, but I think it's a bit different, right?
Yeah. Yes, and actually you are going to see in this the rest of this chapter and next chapter how it's dealt. One that is recognize their guilt and accepts their problems and recognize their problem, how they are rescued and assisted. So there are the transitory houses of assistance in the lower zones that where spirits that show some glimpse of regret are assisted and taken, and some of them are spent some time sleeping in a very having a lot of nightmares and being treated and assisted. But you are right. This case, this group of spirits, until now, they show no signs of remorse, no signs of regret. They just continue to do exactly what they were doing in the physical world. That's why they are there by themselves. This is a group that if you present yourself as an evolved spirit and start talking to them, they won't accept your remarks. They won't admit that they are doing anything wrong. They will think that they are, they are in their right because what they are doing, everybody else does. So it's you have to wait until they show any spirit that is in this state. You have to wait until they show some sign of regret, some opening for assistance. Until then, there's nothing you can do. But it's important here. I see some people that joined later in the meeting, so I just want to reinforce before Paco asks question. These are spirits that actively took advantage of others during their physical lives. So this is they end up in a difficult place because they were actively doing harm to others. It's not that they were just selfish, but not because those that are selfish, they harm others, but it's not their intention. It's just who they are. They are just selfish, and that causes harm to others. There are consequences for that, of course, but it's not actively. This group of spirits actively took advantage of others, actively took advantage as trying to take financial advantages from those around them. So that's why they find themselves in this place. Okay, Paco.
You're calling me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to make a few comments. One, well, that's not far from our reality in which 1% of the country controls 80% of the stock market. One. Second, you don't have to be in the lower zone to be in hell. You could be in hell right here. Yeah. With your conscience, like you said. Conscience is that what determines almost everything. I mean, it's your own jail, And the other one I forgot now was the other one.
Their minds are kind of lost, but they are not living in hell in the sense that you are suffering and regretting what you have done. They are living in their own world, so to say, where they have all this gold, which is not really gold, and they are trying to protect themselves from imaginary thieves that are trying to steal their gold, because that's how they live their physical lives. So the definition of their own hell, I have a problem thinking that they are living in their own hell. I think they're living in their own reality, which is a reality of continue to try to grow their wealth and protecting themselves from the thieves with like-minded spirits that think exactly like them. But yes, you're right. There is no everywhere that you find spirits like that incarnated, and you find spirits like that discarnated in other places. Again, the spiritual world is a vast place with different realities, but we are talking specifically at this reality that Andre Luiz and Calderaro are visiting, where these caverns, these lower zones. But many times when we talk about with spirits on our mediumship meetings that come from these places, they don't tell us they're living in hell. They don't think they're living in hell. They want to go back there. They want to continue doing what they were doing. They're happy with their reality. If we could say happy, it's not the right word, but they are comfortable in their reality. They don't think they are in hell. So it's kind of a difficult discussion that to understand, because for us to understand what they are going through, you would have to go through, and it's difficult for us to relate, but we can only analyze how they ended up finding themselves in this reality, which is, you know, what I said before, actively taking advantage of others for financial gains.
I think it's important to clarify here.
Thank you.
Always good to remind ourselves that the so-called lower zones and the different neighborhoods, let's say, in the lower zone and in the higher zone as well, it's not an area designated by God or by whoever to place suffering spirits. Those areas is actually it's formed by the collective minds.
Exactly.
The same way that our neighborhoods is a reflection of the collective minds of our neighborhoods over here.
Mm-hmm.
The lower zone is the same thing. So there we find individuals with the same kind of desires, the same kind of wishes, this collective minds with the same type of responsibilities with the divine laws, that will kind of form that neighborhood, if you want. It's not the idea that God create that area that you call whatever lower zones, call it hell, because if you think that area is created to place suffering spirits, it's hell. So hell exists. And we in Spiritism does not believe that, do not understand that. Our minds will take us where it belongs, and the collective minds will form that neighborhood that we call lower zones with different gradations. So I think it's very important to eliminate the idea of hell as it's used commonly.
Very good. Okay, let's move a little bit here.
Okay.
I was about to reply. Zoraida, go.
Okay. Where are we? I felt, right?
I was about to reply.
Okay. I was about to reply when one of the elderly men raised his voice amid the strange concert and exclaimed, "My friends, are we victims of a nightmare? Sometimes I think that we might actually be wrong. How long have we been wandering around away from home? Where are we anyway? Have we gone mad?" Oh, that voice. Listening to it, a terrible doubt took hold of me. Who was going mad? Who was going mad? I asked myself. Me or that old man? I gazed at his features. Oh no, could it be? That wrenched spirit reminded me of my parental grandfather, Claudio. He had been affectionate toward me from my early childhood. He had been ice cold toward others, but had been gentle with me, and often patting my toddler's head with his age-wrinkled hand. His eyes would sparkle when they met mine, and my mother always said that that only in my company could he find calm from the attacks of nerves that preceded his demise. I couldn't recall his life story in detail, but I did know that he had made a considerable fortune in scandalous profits and experienced a very difficult old age because of his excessive attachment to money. Greatly troubled in his final years, he saw conspirators and thieves everywhere. My father was extremely worried and brought him to our house, where my mother helped him through his final suffering. In an instant, I remembered his death. I came home from school to kiss his cold hands for the last time. I never forgot how he looked in death. His hands were curled on his chest, as if he were greedingly guarding a secret treasure. And in his glassy eyes, which merciful hands had been unable to close, roamed the terror of the unknown, as if he were being attacked by tragic visions in the beyond, to which he had been snatched against his will. Over the course of time, I found out that my grandfather had left a significant financial inheritance, which we, his relatives, wasted on opulent fancies. As I look back at the past, I realized that a strong tied bond made me to that wretch who was still suffering the nightmare of earthly gold, carrying handfuls of mud that he pressed affectionately to his heart.
Okay. So here we find out that one of the old men was actually Andre Luiz' grandfather, right? Claudio. And what we see here first, the first phrase is, he is showing signs of doubt. That's the beginning of the recovery for this type of spirits. When you start questioning yourself, when you start doubting your beliefs, is when you open yourself to be assisted. So he says here, aren't we victims of a nightmare? Sometimes I think that we might actually be wrong. You see there, the small seeds of doubt of what they have been doing. He doesn't even completely understand that they are discarnated, because he says, how long have we been wandering around away from home? Have we gone mad? So he's starting to realize that something is wrong. And that's the sign and the opening for spiritual assistance that is always there, available, but you have to open yourself. So then Andre Luiz talks a little bit about him. He recognizes that the voice, and he gets very confused, because you can imagine, right? You are there in the middle of a work, you're trying to understand and learn more about these people, and suddenly you hear a familiar voice, a voice of someone that meant something to you, because you see here, he was not very friendly to anyone. He was ice cold towards others, but he liked Andre Luiz. He cared about little Andre Luiz. And it doesn't say in this chapter, but we'll say in the other chapter. And so I'll give a little spoiler alert. Andre Luiz became a doctor, went to college with the money from his grandfather. So his grandfather asked his father when he was dying to use the money to pay for the education of Andre Luiz as a doctor. He wanted Andre Luiz to become a doctor. So we will read about this next chapter. But so it's important to understand that he had at least one person that he cared about, Andre Luiz. And, interesting enough, and not coincidentally, is Andre Luiz who is going to help him get out of this difficult situation. So whenever we open ourselves for assistance, our loved ones that are in any condition, again, if they need to be in a good condition to help us, will be there and available, will be there to help and assist in our rescue, if possible. Not always possible. But in this case, the only person that he really cared during his life, and you'll see in the next chapter all the reasons that he became this problematic soul. You see his story with his sister. We'll see a little bit later in this chapter also. It's important here that when he says, in these final years, he saw conspirators and thieves everywhere. Why? because he spent his life in conspiracy and stealing from others. So when all you think is how to deceive others, you think that everyone else is trying to deceive you. And by the end, when your physical body becomes frail and you start living half here and half there, and you start seeing spirits, you are going to see all spirits that are threatening you. And you are seeing this, he starts seeing conspirators and thieves everywhere. So, and then Andre Luiz describes when he dies, how he's dying with his hands holding a treasure, an imaginary treasure, and talks about the financial inheritance. So it's interesting here, the description of his grandfather, who he really was and why he finds himself in this place, surrounded by these other spirits that think like him. But that it's important here to understand the close relationship that he had with Andre Luiz. Andre Luiz was too young when his grandfather died to understand how his grandfather acted in life, and probably his father and mother and relatives did not tell him very much. So what he knows basically is that his grandfather left a financial inheritance, that he took advantage of others, but he doesn't really know much more, apparently, by what he remembers. And we'll see later that he doesn't really know what the past of his grandfather. So,
yeah,
interesting part here. Any comments, questions here? Okay, nope. So continue.
yeah, okay. Just then, while the memories were filling my mind, one of his miserable companions shouted, "Nightmare? No, no. Claudio, don't be so dramatic." His name had been spoken. The confirmation horrified me. I wanted to scream, but could not. Understanding what was going on inside, the helpful Calderaro assured me, "Andre, now I understand the meaning of your coming here. Sister Simbriana was right. There is no time to lose. The old man is showing himself receptive. He has begun to understand that he's probably in the wrong, that perhaps he's been living a cruel nightmare. Let's help him. We have to get him to see us." Highly concerned, I watched as a dedicated instructor began applying fluidic energies to the dim eyes of my unfortunate forefather. With his providential efflux, he received temporary lucidity and was finally able to see us. "Oh," he cried out before his terrified colleagues, "what a different light." And rubbing his eyes, he asked us, "Where have you come from? Are you priests?" He was obviously alluding to our snow-white tunics. I took a slight step forward and asked, "My friend, are you Claudio M., an old landholder from around V?" "Yes, you know me. Who are you?" With a sigh of relief, he added emotionally, "I've been imprisoned in these mysterious regions for so long. It's rifled with dangers and monsters, but it's got a lot of gold, a lot of gold. Your words are encouraging. Oh, for God's sake, help me get out. I want to go back." He kneeled with arms stretched out to me and repeated, "To go back, to see my family again, to feel at home again." Moved, I embraced him. Now, wanting to shock him with untimely revelations, I explained, "Claudio M., you are the victim of a regrettable error. Your former home closed to you alone with your physical eyes. You imprisoned your spirit in an empty dream of deceitful riches. Death snatched your soul from its corporeal abode over 40 years ago. The old man's distraught eyes popped out. He didn't fight it. He immediately began to weep convulsively, tearing at my innermost fibers. I really can feel it, he gasped, inspiring compassion. My head's ablaze. I can't think straight, but what about the gold? The gold that had piled up with so much sweat. Look at your hands. Now that divine clarity is inspiring your spirit. The treasure you accumulated at the expense of others' difficulties has turned to mud-like refuse. Look.
Okay.
Okay.
So what we see here is what happens when a spirit, a suffering spirit, or in this case, spirit living a difficult reality, but still in the illusion of this reality, starts to awaken. First, the companions are not changing. So when he talks about when he talks about the are we living in a nightmare, his companions say, nightmare, no, don't be so dramatic. So the others are not changing, he's the only one changed, and that's changed. And then what is important, what Calderaro tells Andre Luiz, now I understand the meaning of your coming here. So Sister Cipriana, when she said that she didn't think that it was good for Andre Luiz to go deep in the caverns, ask them to stay outside. Of course, she knew what she was talking about. She knew that Andre Luiz had to go through the experience to assist his grandfather. And that's, what we mentioned before, the importance of a loved one to help and assist. And first, he doesn't recognize Andre Luiz, of course. When he left the physical vessel, when his physical body died, Andre Luiz was a child or a young man. Maybe he was, I don't know, they don't say here, 10, 11. He talks about over 40 years ago, he had died. Andre Luiz died young. He had a disease and died young, spent 8 years in the lower zone. So you made all the calculations, and Andre Luiz, he probably died when Andre Luiz was between 10 and 12, 15 years old. So he doesn't recognize Andre Luiz when he sees Andre Luiz as a 40, 50 something year old that he's, how he presents himself. And he's been so long in this state of confusion, living in his own world, that he's not really even prepared to recognize Andre Luiz at this moment. We'll see later what happens. The first thing when he sees, when the Calderaro gives him some passes, fluidic energies to the eyes. So in what we know as passes, he regains some lucidity, as he says here, temporary, and was able to see them. One thing that we always mention is less evolved spirits are only able to see more evolved spirits when more evolved spirits present themselves, make themselves visible, right? But they will make themselves visible when there is a reason, like here, because when you have a group of, like before, a group of spirits talking about their gold, about their, the thieves around and things like that, even if they present themselves like this, Andre Luiz and Calderaro would make themselves visible, the other spirits would probably either ignore or run away or attack them, because they are not interested in that. They're not prepared. Now, his grandfather now gave them an opening. And when he gave them an opening, Calderaro immediately started to take care of him and allow him to see them. And when he sees them, this different light, the first thing that he sees is two spirits dressed in white. And he first, of course, he thinks they are priests. Andre Luiz then asks to formally identify him, asks if he's Claudio M, and he confirms, and then Andre Luiz realizes, confirms that it is his grandfather, and he begins to recognize the need to get out of there, right? That he says that I'm imprisoned here, I want to see my family again. So he starts to feel regret. He starts to feel the pain of everything that is going through with him. And Andre Luiz slowly starts to talk to him that he's imprisoned in your, in your own dreams of riches, and that he's been dead of more than 40 years. And his reaction, he doesn't fight against it. He's confused. He says, I can't think straight. He still thinks about the gold. Of course, he's not going to immediately forget what has been his purpose for the last 40 years in the spiritual world, which is to accumulate gold, right? And then Andre Luiz starts making him look at his hands and realize that what he has is not really gold. That's, when you are dealing with disturbed spirits, it's difficult sometimes to know when it's the right time to tell them some truths, right? And we experience this every Monday, right? The difficulty to know when and what to say exactly. But here is clear that he needs to understand that what he has in his hands is really not gold, that he's living an illusion, because that's the only way that he's going to accept the help and assistance and reevaluate what he has been doing for this past many years. And again, we talk here about 40 years, but we have to understand that time is relative, right? When you are obsessed with an idea, which is this case, he's not obsessing anyone, he's obsessed with an idea. He only thinks about how to accumulate gold and protect gold from the thieves. They really don't see time passes. So he's living there for 40 years, but he doesn't really understand that it's been 40 years. Andre Luiz has to tell him. And we see cases of spirits that been centuries persecuting others without realizing that centuries have gone. So, again, as we say, we like to say, time is relative. So the fact that it's time for him to realize that he's been, for some time lost in this illusion is what's important, and that's what Andre Luiz is trying to tell him. Okay. Mm-hmm. Any comments here? Questions? Okay. I think everybody's curious to know what happened. What happens next?
My grandfather began to contemplate the wads of mud he had been carrying and cried out in horror. He rested his tear-filled eyes on me and considered, could this be my punishment? My wrongs toward Ismenia demanded punishment? While the sobs choked him, I asked, who's Ismenia? My sister. I trampled on her rights. Moving us deeply, he continued, God sent you. Please hear my confession. As he lay dying, my father entrusted me with a sister who was not a legitimate daughter of our family. My devoted and saintly mother raised her with the same boundless dedication that she gave to me. But when I found myself alone, I kicked her out. I proved that we weren't related by blood so that I could more easily inherit the fortune that my father had bequeathed us. The poor woman pleaded and suffered, but I relegated her to a miserable fate so that I can protect the solid financial base I had received. I was rich. I increased my wealth and continued to do so. Gazing at his soiled hands, he continued bitterly. And now I was going to console him. To open my tear moved hard to him. However, Calderaro made a foreboding gesture that suggested silence. My grief-filled grandfather continued, unveiling my horizons of sentiment. Where are my family members, whose future I so worried about? Where's the money I piled up so painstakingly to the detriment of my own soul? Where's my sister, whose resources I snatched away? Why was I taught that life would go on beyond the grave? Am I really dead to the world, or crazy and blind? Or am I so miserable? Who's going to help me? Extending his withered arms, he pleaded, have pity on me. My parents were put in the grave many years ago, and my children have surely forgotten me. I'm despised, I have no one. Help me, emissaries of Eternal One. Please don't forsake an old man betrayed by his ambitions and purposes. Now that I can see what I am, I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. His tear-veiled gaze lingered on me as he remarked, my family has forgotten how devoted I used to be. Only one person in the world would remember me. He would hold out his protective hands if he knew where I was. His dolorous mask displayed an expression of kindness as he clarified. My grandson, Andre Luiz, was the apple of my eye. Many times his affection comforted my tortured mind. At home, on many occasions, I expressed my hopes that he would dedicate himself to medicine. I left him an inheritance in my will for this purpose. I had hopes of seeing him to do that, to do the good that I, an ignorant man, was unable to do. Remorse frequently assailed me for the extortion I had inflicted on my sister, but I was comforted by the idea that the grandson of my heart would in some way spend the money I had inappropriately hoarded by educating himself suitably for the benefit of others. He would be the benefactor of the poor and the sick. He would sow generous seeds where my useless existence had scattered stones and thorns of foolishness. My grandson will be handsome, beloved, and respected. Fixing his attention on my gestures and wiping away corporeous tears, he asked in a pleading voice, as God's messengers, mind you take the awful news to my grandson about the evils that consume me? I don't deserve to be delivered from these dungeons in which I have gone mad, but it would be of some relief to know that Andre is aware of my suffering.
Okay. So very interesting here, right?
Mhm.
The realization of the wrongs and the beginning of the regret and the desire to change. All very small, very little, but it's a start. He has to start somewhere. That's what's important here. And finally, he starts telling his story, and he talks about his sister Ismenia, that you can see that Andre Luiz never heard of her. So he erased her name from the family, was able to send her away, and the family never knew about her, the family meaning his descendants. So he tells that when his father had a daughter from a previous relationship, doesn't say if he was married or not, that he brought to the new family when he got married to Andre Luiz's, actually to Andre Luiz's great grandmother, right? that that this mania was raised with the same dedication, but when the father died, of course, Claudio kicked her out and proved that she was not related by blood, meaning, you know, there was no DNA at the time. So he of course used his money to gather some proofs that she was not part of the family, kicked her away, and made her disappear from the family. But you see where it stays in our conscience. He says that he was never able to forget what he did to her. That you know, deep in his conscious, he still had the guilt of what he had done to her. Because what happens is that when we consciously make a decision that we deeply down we know it's wrong, but we do it anyway for ulterior motives, we carry this guilt that we try to hide and make it disappear from our minds, but our subconscious or unconscious will keep that guilt, and it will come back when we open ourselves to look at the past. So he carries this with it, and it's interesting when he continues and he talks, justifying to himself how he justified all the money that he accumulated, that he was doing it for his family, and the family doesn't recognize him. He did all this for his family, and the family all forgot about him. And then he complains, why didn't he learn about the reality of the spiritual life when he was alive? Well, again, it doesn't go into details here, but if we look at all the opportunities around us to look at the spiritual reality of ourselves, it's available to all of us. Not all of us are interested or care to look for the spiritual life. So, you know, you hear a lot of people saying, I'll worry when I get there. And you see some people saying, well, I don't believe in any of this. This is all fantasy. So if, again, they don't go deep here, but if we go back to his life, if we had studied his life, I'm sure that there were opportunities in his life to understand or to at least entertain the reality that there is a spiritual world, even if he didn't want to go into details, but he didn't care at all about it. He only thought about accumulating wealth. So now what he finds himself complaining that he wasn't taught that life goes beyond the grave, and that he's dead to the world, or he's crazy. You see everything coming together, the repentance, the guilty, the realization that he has been living an illusion for so many years. And then, you know, he asks for assistance, for help. He says that he has no one, that he's an old man, that he was betrayed by his ambition. So, you know, that's what you see normally. You start combining guilty or with feeling sorry for yourself. So you start feeling sorry for yourself, and then you ask the others to help you. I need help. I need to be saved. Where are the others that can help me? My family forgot about him. It takes a while for you to go over the realization of your wrongs, to overcome the guilty part, to understand the necessity of repairing. He complains here that the family has forgotten how devoted he was. And then that's when he talks about Andre Luiz in the end, right? That he was his only hope, that his justification for all the wealth he was accumulating, is to give his grandson the opportunity to study medicine, the opportunity to be a good person, and that he would use the money that he accumulated inappropriately, he says here, by educating himself and helping others. So you see, even in the deranged minds of those that are obsessed with material things, you see the divine law, the God's law there imprinted in his conscience when he says, I hope he uses the money that I saved for him for the benefit of others. So even there, deep in his conscience, he knows that the only way forward is to help and assist others. And he cannot do that. He couldn't do that. It was stronger than him, the desire to accumulate wealth. But he hopes that in his distorted views, his grandson using his money to the benefit of others will in some form alleviate the guilt that he carries with him deeply in his conscience. And of course, he doesn't recognize Andre Luiz, and he asks these God's messengers. Now he understands that there is a God, or he accepts, or he starts to entertain the reality of a God, and he says that he doesn't deserve to be saved from there, but at least it will be some consolation if he knew that Andre Luiz is aware of his suffering and is in some way able to send him some thoughts of love and care or something like that, right? And it's interesting because Andre Luiz didn't really, in his physical life, fulfill his grandfather's desire. He graduated in medicine and he used his diploma just to treat some rich people, and he didn't care that much for helping and assisting others in the way that his grandfather wanted. But he's there back to help him and assist him now in this time of suffering and realization of his pain. Okay. Any comments, questions here? We're almost at the end, so we have time to talk about it a little bit. Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're finishing the chapter now.
Okay. Assistant Calderaro signals for me to restrain myself while waiting for more clarification were unable to hold me back. My chest burst in a torrent of irrepressible weeping. In this place, I was not in the presence of high assemblies, whose emissions of energy would support me to the end of my instructive struggle for self-discipline, but was instead in the presence of the regrettable vestige of earthly passions. I recalled my grandfather patting me on the head. I remembered my father always alerting to the old man's wishes concerning my academic preparation. I thought about the long years the poor man had spent there, hanging on to ideas of financial possession. I understood the extent of my debt to him concerning the medical degree that I hadn't used honorably while in the world. I directed a pleading look at Calderaro, begging him to forgive me. The assistant smiled and understood everything. Who could lose their childlikeness completely? If Christ himself, the supreme guide of the earth, had once opened his tender arms in the manger. Mentally returning to the scenes of a distant childhood, I felt like a little boy again. I leaped over the space that separated us and kneeled down at the feet of my unfortunate benefactor, who looked at me, trembling and frightened. I covered his hands with kisses, and raising my tear-filled eyes, I asked, Grandpa Calderaro, don't you recognize me? I couldn't even begin to describe what happened next. For a moment, I forgot about the study I had intended to conduct. I disregarded the images of the environment that provided curiosity and dread. My spirit breathed in sincere recognition and the purest love. And while the wrenched, miserly spirits cried out, some in rebelliousness, others laughing furtively, incapable of understanding this unexpected scene, I, supported by Calderaro, who also wiped away discreet tears because of the emotion that had overcome me, held my grandfather in my arms as if I were mad with joy, carrying a precious burden that was sweet and light to my heart.
Okay. So what happens here is that Andre Luiz breaks down, right? Calderaro signals for him to restrain himself, but he wasn't able to do that. And when we talk about surgeons wouldn't operate on the family members, when you become emotionally involved, it's difficult to be impartial and to deal with the situation. That's exactly what happens with Andre Luiz here. He completely lost his ability to be treating his grandfather the way he needed to be treated. Instead, he started crying. All the emotions came back to him in the sense that he felt for his grandfather. He felt for someone that in the end was very important in his life, because he was responsible for him having a decent, comfortable life. We can always discuss the origins, but I know that there is a question in the Spirit's book that talks about if you are living comfortably with the money that your ancestors stole, are you guilty? And the spirits answered that no, we cannot be responsible for things we've done for the others. What we have to do is to make good use of what we have to be of assistance to others, always, right? So, but Andre Luiz here recognizes that what the importance of his grandfather. His grandfather may have been horrible to all others, but to Andre Luiz, he was not. He was something important. Even the worst spirits have someone they love and have someone that it's important to them. We in the gospel we study that passage that says the passage, love your enemies, that is easy to love the ones that love you, but the real task is to love your enemies, meaning even the criminals have the ones they love and the ones they care for. So what difference makes you with the criminals if you're loving only your loved ones? And this is exactly what it's happening here. Even his grandfather, with no loved ones left to help and assist him, has Andre Luiz that still cares for him, still recognizes the importance of him in his life, and is there to assist. But of course, Andre Luiz, we can see, is in no condition of providing effective assistance at the moment because he's overwhelmed with emotions. And when you are overwhelmed with emotions, you cannot be of effective assistance. But that's why we have Calderaro there that is going to take care of it. And we'll see in the next chapter Cipriana coming back and assisting it. So just for us, for all of you to come back next month for it. Next chapter is a very interesting study of a reincarnation case, meaning the preparation for Claudio's reincarnation and how Ismenia is going to be also involved, because of course we have to reincarnate amongst those that we caused harm and that or cause harm to us. So you know, spoiler alert, he's going to reincarnate as a son of the Ismenia reincarnated, because not the original Ismenia, but she's already reincarnated. So it's a very interesting chapter that we're going to study next month about Claudio's reincarnation, which is the only way for him to repair the harm that he has done to himself and to others. So you know, that's how we end up this chapter. As a note here, you see that while all this is happening, what's happening to the other spirits that are around there? They are there not understanding anything that is happening. Some of them laughing because what they are seeing is just Claudio talking to someone that they cannot see to whom Claudio is talking to, because Andre Luiz and Calderaro made themselves visible only to Claudio. The others are seeing Claudio talking to them nonsense. So some of them are angry, some of them are laughing, and they are incapable of understanding this unexpected scene. This is what happens when you have a group and only one spirit is being rescued. The others, clearly not prepared to understand what's going on, are completely lost there. And it reminded me of the scene in Paul and Stephen when then Saul of Tarsus meets Jesus, right? He falls from the camel with the light of Jesus appearing in front of him, and his companions do not understand what's going on. They see Saul talking to someone, and you know, in a state that they don't understand, and Saul is talking to Jesus, and Jesus telling him what to do. And it's the same thing here. These spirits do not understand what's happening, what's going on around them, and you know, the reaction when something happens around you that you don't understand, you get uncomfortable with the situation. You either rebel or you laugh, but you know, you don't. If any of them had made any intention opening to be assisted, of course they will be assisted also, because Andre Luiz and Calderaro will be able to help anyone that was ready to be assisted. But none of them are not ready, have no regret and no intention of receiving any assistance. So that's why they are unable to understand what's going on around them. Okay. So that's it. We finished the chapter. We have some minutes if someone wants to question, comment. Otherwise,
John, what book are we going to use next after this?
I think the book that follows this is Between Heaven and Earth, if I'm not mistaken, which is a very beautiful story. Also, it's the prayer that the little girl sends to her mother, that is actually obsessing her stepmother. So her mother is not able to come to help, but the spirits receive the prayer, because the prayer is never lost, and come to help and assist her. And Andre Luiz is part of it's a very interesting book. I think I'm almost sure that that's the next book after this on the collection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure, Ruth. Go ahead.
You mentioned that about in a mediumistic meeting, you get spirits that they don't realize that they are where they are. So what, and they don't want to help. So what is the reason for them to show up in a mediumistic meeting?
Because they will only be taken to a mediumistic meeting when they show signs of regret or signs of doubt, meaning that the mediumship meeting will be able to help them. Spirits, like, you know, in this case, let's use this case that we just studied. None of these companions will be taken to a mediumistic meeting, because they are not interested and not even able to receive any help and assistance. They will be, it'll be a waste of time for us and for them. Claudio, it will be, even if it was, let's forget about Andre Luiz and Calderaro there. Claudio, when he starts questioning, are we mad? Is this, what have we been doing this? He opens a window to be helped and assisted. So the spirits that are responsible for our meeting, they can bring some spirits that are in similar cases like Claudio to be helped and assisted if it's useful to them and to us. So the spirits that are brought to a mediumship meeting are spirits that are in some way prepared and ready to be assisted. It doesn't mean that it's going to work. I always tell the people, and I mentioned this, when you study the work of Francisco Xavier, the medium that wrote all these books. I think it's in the book that Elmo mentioned before, the psychophonic transcommunications, that in his mediumship meetings, they were effective on 70% of the cases, meaning they were able to help 70% of the spirits. So even in the meeting where Chico is the medium, they are not able to help 100%. We have no illusions that we are able to help this to really make them change. But the seeds implanted in the conversations will stay there. Even if they refuse to change and refuse to accept what we are telling them, everything we say to them, they store, and eventually they will use it when they are prepared. It's never a waste of time, and we always try to tell them that they say, I don't, you are wasting your time here. I don't want to, I don't want to waste my time talking to you guys. And we always say, we're not wasting our time. We're not wasting your time. They don't recognize it, but we know that there is always an opening, and that's why they are brought there.
I think this chapter is very reassuring for workers of mediumship meetings, especially the ones that deals with rescue, like our cases. The big word in this chapter for me is the Calderaro used is receptive. When he says he's receptive, you have to help, you have to act now, right? I guarantee that in this case, Claudio did not know that he was receptive. So very often you're going to find the spirits coming to a spiritist medium unaware of themselves, unaware of the little changes that has happened to them in their minds, the little lapses of change of thoughts that makes them receptive or potentially receptive. And then they deserve the opportunity of going to a meeting. As João said, will they respond as we would like to? We don't know. We can say it for sure. Another thing that is very important and reassuring in this chapter is the idea of the loved ones. Things that we always use in the mediumship meetings. You have been brought here to the prayers, to the love, to the effort of your loved ones. And very often they will say, I have no one loves me. And the importance of reassuring them, yes, there is somebody who loves you. And in this case, a grandson out of, the parents, the sons and daughters, their wife, those are they would think more commonly, right? The spirit you think of. In his case, we think of the grandson, a little bit farther of what we would expect to be. We would expect to be usually the mother, the father, the wife, or the husband, then the main offspring, mothers, sons and daughters, in this case, an offspring. It could be a co-worker, it could be an ankle, an ant, we don't know. So to bring in meetings the fact that you are brought here through the love of those who truly care for you, very often Spirit's going to say, no, I don't have anyone who loves me. No one loves me. And to be able to make them reflect that there is somebody out there, that thinks of you, that loves you, is actually very important to the Spirit itself, to help the Spirit in this process of recovery. And these are not just words that we use. And at times, perhaps, if I use myself as an example, it's almost become a routine thing to say, but it's beyond the routine. It is something very significant. If not for you who are saying, for that Spirit receiving that words is extremely important for them. But to me, again, the greater word in this chapter is the word receptive. It doesn't mean that Spirit is aware that is already receptive. Very often they are not aware, and they will have to reject the idea that they are receptive.
Yes, Carol.
Carol, what about spirits that are extremely narcissistic? Is that a lot longer in their process of receiving help? Because they're just going to put up a wall no matter what. Maybe you have some insights, perhaps? Thank you.
Again, you have to open yourself to receive assistance. So a spirit that is someone that is narcissistic, eventually they will suffer enough that they will open themselves to assistance, right? It will take some time. As long as they keep themselves closed in their narcissistic ways, there will be no assistance available. Assistance is always available, but they won't be able to use it because they close themselves. They only think about their own world, right? Narcissus, right? It comes narcissistic comes from Narcissus that looked in the mirror and only made a deal with the for his youth, right? That was Narcissus' story, right? So as long as you keep yourself thinking only about yourself, only about your own reality, you don't open yourself to the outside world, you are going to, it will take as long as needed, right? And again, we are eternal souls. So if it takes 300 years, what is 300 years in eternity, right? Here it took 40 years for Andre Luiz' grandfather. What about the others there? We don't know how long they are there. Probably some of them are longer than his grandfather, and some of them are less. But it'll take them as long as they need to recognize, to open themselves, to doubt themselves, which is the first step. You start doubting what you are doing. As long as you don't doubt, you are sure that what you are doing is right, even if it's completely wrong, nothing is going to change. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. Just a side note here. Luis reminded me that the next book is actually Liberation. It's not Between Heaven and Earth. And the Liberation is a great book. It's the rescue of the leader of the lower zones, a pope, former Pope Gregory. So that's going to be a very interesting book to study also. So that in that book, Andre Luiz is going to go deeper in the lower zones where he wasn't allowed in this last chapter. He will be going there next book.
Okay. Thank you.
But we still have a couple of months on this one. We have 2 chapters left. Okay. Okay. Anyone else? All right. So next Sunday, it's the second Sunday of the month. We'll be studying the Gospel according to Spiritism. Okay.
Yes.
And Carol, you do our final prayer.
Yes. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Elmo, and everyone. Excuse me. Infinite Creator, all goodness and grace, we are grateful to be together today to receive the teachings, the wisdom, and the knowledge. We are grateful to our spiritual benefactors who are with us, who are guiding us, who are preparing the way for us to take the higher road in this life. May we continue with the studies. May we continue with our prayers. May we continue with our mindfulness throughout the week. For we know that there is always assistance, not only in this world that we are in physically, but also in the spiritual world after we have left the physical body. It is up to us to be receptive to receive that help and to ask for the help. May we ask for our prayers to go to those that need the assistance, that need to open their minds and open their hearts to this love, this help, and the greater good. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies, with our mindfulness and the goodness to all. May we remember those close to us in our prayers, also those in our community, those in SGNY, and the Spiritist movement in general. May we put forth these prayers from our hearts. May we do the good work to be of service, to be compassionate, to be respectful, and to have a loving heart. We close now and ask to receive the love and light of Christ within us, to do the good works, to be in inner peace, and to receive this love and light each day. We close now and ask for all of us to remember to be beacons of light and to care for those who are suffering right now in the world, who need the assistance. Our prayers will be answered. Our prayers are always from the bottom of our hearts to do the good work. We close now and ask to go safely to our friends, our family, our loved ones, and co-workers. Go forth now in peace. Go forth now as beacons of light. So be it.